I'm Julia Mason. I've been a pediatrician for over 30 years, and I've had a special interest in ADHD for decades. I got pulled into the gender controversy in late 2018, and I was a founding member of SEGM in 2019. I've been a thorn in the side of the American Academy of Pediatrics, my professional organization, for over 5 years, trying to get them to take a measured look at the state of the evidence supposedly supporting pediatric sex trait modification. I did this primarily by submitting resolutions to their leadership conference asking the AAP to do a systematic review of the evidence. Almost 2 years ago, in August of 2023, they said they would finally do a systematic review of the evidence, but there's no sign of that happening. Okay, I did check, and Jack Turbin and some people from Yale have filed a plan for some sort of systematic review in the Prospero database earlier this year. So it's possible that that is going to be the AAP product. I'm here to talk about brain development in adolescence and young adulthood. Adolescence is a significant period of brain maturation, second only to the time of early development between birth and 3 years of age. The brain is the last organ of the body to mature, and it matures under the influence of sex hormones. Many experts have described adolescence as occurring between age 10 and age 25. As a pediatrician, when I'm asked how long I'm able to see a patient, I usually say, until you're 18, 21 if I like you. But the truth is that brain development continues past both those ages. And when conditions like ADHD or autism are present, full maturation can be delayed even past age 25 to more like 30. Human societies have restricted access to adult activities such as marriage, voting, buying alcohol, renting a car, and adopting a child to various ages between 16 and 25. It's generally recognized that young people can't always be trusted to make good decisions, particularly on hot button issues. And I love this from Aristotle a long, long time ago. It's such a great quote, and it just goes to show that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Okay, let's talk brain development. Most of you have heard the idea that the brain isn't fully mature until age 25. The images here were obtained by getting sequential MRI scans on the same individuals over a more than 10-year period. The pattern of maturation is very similar in most individuals, but the timing will vary. From early adolescence through their mid-20s, a young person's brain develops somewhat unevenly from back to front. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, important for controlling impulsive decisions, is among the last brain regions to mature, and it doesn't reach adult dimensions until the mid-20s. This front part of the brain is important for executive function and social cognition. These are images from the same study, and I wanted to show you these because they go back to 5 years, and you can really see the colors shift. The colors represent myelination, and to be more precise, the red is pure gray matter, the part of the brain responsible for information processing. Going to blue or purple indicates myelination. And this is a way to visualize the maturation and synaptic pruning that is a big part of brain development in adolescence. In my search for an image of synaptic pruning, I did find this nice image of synaptic development running from birth to 2 years. A 3-year-old has more neurons in their brain than any of us here, but it's complete chaos in there. 3-year-olds are adorable, but we don't let them decide even what's for dinner for reasons. So we start life with a lot of synaptic growth, but this is necessarily followed by significant synaptic pruning. The dendritic spine density, these arms reaching out from the neurons, in childhood is 3 times greater than in adulthood. A newborn is still developing their brain. A 7-year-old has a brain full of potential, and the capacity to believe in magic. And the 15-year-old is starting to select which neuronal connections will be maintained and sped up via myelination. So, myelination is sort of coding the connections between neurons with an insulative material that speeds up the connection within the neurons and protects it from its neighbors. It's like the coating on an electric wire. Because younger brains have more neurons but slower connections, one of the biggest differences between the developing adolescent brain and a mature adult brain is how decisions are made. As I mentioned, brain maturation during adolescence involves synaptic pruning, myelinization, and maturation of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that responds to situations with good judgment. The limbic system, represented in this graphic by the amygdala and the ventral striatum in blue and green, develops sooner than the prefrontal cortex and thus is more dominant in youth. The prominence of the limbic system drives emotional volatility, pleasure, and novelty seeking. It leaves adolescents more sensitive to social rejection and also to mental health problems. Teens will process information with the amygdala, and this is the emotional core of the brain. Young people feel things more intensely and are sometimes immune to logic. They will make a different decision when their emotions are running hot than they would when they are calm, cool, and collected. This can lead to regret. Mature adults lean on the prefrontal cortex for making decisions, which gives them better awareness of things like the potential long-term consequences of a particular decision. Adults have better developed social cognition, a complicated process that involves understanding other people's intentions, desires, and beliefs. The implications for pursuing a medical pathway with permanent bodily changes and potential loss of fertility are obvious. A key fact about all the big brain changes that happen in adolescence is that they are driven by hormone levels and not necessarily by age. Young people's brains develop along with their bodies under the influence of testosterone for boys and estrogen progesterone for girls. As a pediatrician, I see kids who are both early and late bloomers, and the quality of their interactions varies in relation to their pubertal stage, sometimes more than their age. The image here is from a paper about menopause, but it shows the areas of the brain that are rich in sex hormone receptors: the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the cerebellum. So, during adolescence, these parts of the brain are forming more connections, and that drives a lot of the changes we see in behavior and decision making ability, executive function, social cognition, memory, new learning, and emotional regulation. So, to recap, the sex hormones affect both the body and the brain. There's a lot to navigate in adolescence. And under the stress of all these changes, mental illness can emerge. And most diagnosed mental illnesses emerge prior to age 24. This has never been an easy time of life, but never before have doctors offered a way to block puberty and try to avoid the normal distress of adolescence. Here's another way to look at adolescent development. And I'm sorry if this is hard to read, but I love this slide. It's not meant to be precise, it's more of a vibes thing. I first saw it in 2021 during a webinar presentation by Rita Kerta-Kaltiala. She's an adolescent psychiatrist in Finland who was tasked with setting up an adolescent gender clinic there in 2011. And she's just marvelous. She published a paper in 2019 sharing her experience with medical gender transitions in young people, which was that those who were doing well in terms of psychiatric symptoms and functioning before cross-sex hormones mainly did fine after treatment. However, those who had psychiatric treatment needs or problems in school, peer relationships, or managing everyday matters continued to have problems during transition. Her conclusion was that medical gender reassignment is not enough to improve functioning and relieve psychiatric comorbidities among adolescents with gender dysphoria. In February of 2024, she published a key paper, All Cause and Suicide Mortalities Among Adolescents and Young Adults Who Contacted Specialized Gender Identity Services in Finland, 1996 to 2019, in the British Medical Journal of Mental Health. This was a registry-based paper in a country with nationalized medicine, so no loss to follow-up. It showed that gender affirmative care did not decrease the risk of suicide in young people, but also that the risk was quite low. It was not zero, but it was equivalent to that for young people with other mental health issues. So back to the slide. Dr. Kaltiala developed this image for a paper on adolescent forensic psychiatry to illustrate that the actions of adolescents can fluctuate wildly in terms of maturity. So you can see that physical development advances most rapidly and peaks soon after age 16. Cognitive development lags a bit. It starts out increasing more rapidly, and then it slows down. Emotional development actually backtracks roughly in middle school and then proceeds to improve, with the boys lagging behind the girls a bit. Finally, ranging wildly between the higher cognitive abilities and the lesser emotional capabilities is the individual behavior of that young person. One day, they are taking good care and making good decisions, and the next day, they're letting things go and making poor decisions. Beyond just normal development, I'd like to note how neurodiversity, specifically ADHD and autism, can further delay the development of mature decision-making skills. Just about everyone agrees that in ADHD, maturation of the prefrontal cortex is delayed, some say by about 30% compared to same-age peers. The development of the prefrontal cortex was delayed 5 years in one study. This implies that young people with ADHD may not be making their best decisions until they're around 30 years old. And because our lives aren't complicated enough, up to 20-25% of children with ADHD fall onto the autism spectrum, ASD, and as many as 50-60% or more of children with ASD have ADHD. Both types of neurodiverse kids can be drawn into gender ideology, either via hyperfocus or it being a special interest. Gender promises to explain why a young person isn't fitting in with their peers, and it has a plan to fix everything, if only you believe. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder that changes the development of the brain in more ways than just the timing. On the left is an image from a study that demonstrated slower development of white matter in the brains of autistic boys. On the right is a figure from a review paper that's all about how executive function is affected in autism. As usual, it's complicated. It's noted that individuals with autism do not exhibit the typical improvements during adolescence on skills that are important for navigating the transition to adulthood. These skills include executive function, social cognition and communication, and emotional recognition and self-awareness. Neuroimaging studies indicate arrested or atypical brain maturation in the striatal, frontal, and temporal regions during adolescence in autism. Adolescents with ASD are at a higher risk for problems with social health, connections to peers, and mental health, things like anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, and substance use compared to typically developing adolescents. They are also more likely than neurotypical adolescents to experience stressors such as bullying, social isolation, and health related risky behaviors, including suicide attempts. Similar to face recognition, the recognition of emotional facial expressions becomes more impaired from adolescence into adulthood in those with autism, while neurotypical peers improve on these tasks. I'm not the only one who's struck by the large numbers of young people and adults in the trans community who are on the autistic spectrum. It's easier for me to understand how a girl, perhaps with undiagnosed autism, can discover trans and feel like it explains everything that's gone wrong for her in her life up to that point. The autistic brain is described as an exceptionally male brain by some experts. That said, I recall Dr. Az Hakim, a psychiatrist in England, saying that adult male autists were more likely than others to be satisfied with their transition as long as everybody follows the rules and uses their preferred name and pronouns.